Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of What's on Your Mind. I'm your host, Nimade Belu, or That African Butterfly, as I'm known on social media. I'm so excited to be bringing you a great guest with me today. It's still May, so it's still Mental Health Awareness Month. Now, I know we talk about mental health all the time here on What's on Your Mind, but we're really zoning in on some topics this month for Mental Health Awareness Month. And today with me, I have Stephen Beaudoin. He is the current CEO of the Delaware School of Music. He was recognized by the Musical Americas magazine as one of music industry's top movers and shapers, and by the Portland Business Journal as a noted nonprofit leader. He, as I mentioned, is part of the Music School of Delaware as their new leader, but he comes in with over 20 years of experience. And he's really just a fun person to talk to. We've connected over Instagram, and I enjoy what he brings to our lives here in Delaware through music and through all of his different activities and traveling. So thank you so much for joining us, Stephen.
Nimade, I'm so happy to be with you. And I have been a fan of yours since I first accepted this role way back in December. And I started researching influencers in Delaware, and I was immediately struck by you and your work and impact in the state. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Is there anything that I left out on your intro that you'd like to share with everybody?
No, that was very kind of you. Fun fact, I'm the youngest of four kids, and I come from a family that has really been animated by the intersection of creativity and social justice. And maybe we can talk more about that today, but I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yes, awesome. I love that. You definitely want to tap into that. And I was telling you, I mentioned that I like following your stories and seeing what you're doing. And lately you've been talking about your younger years. I think sometimes we on social media tend to reflect more necessarily than sometimes people who aren't on it, like those of us who share our lives. There's just something I've noticed about like talking about things or wanting to make examples. I find that I reflect on my younger years a lot more than I probably would if I wasn't trying to like tie in or tell a story or something. And you've been talking a lot about the middle school years, which has triggered me because those were rough years for me. And it sounds like they were a little bit rough for you too.
Yeah, I think the passage of middle school can often be rough years for a lot of folks. So for you, for me, for many people, it probably is a pretty universal experience, at least in the United States, that those middle school years, for a lot of reasons, what kids are going through developmentally at that time, and the way that presents and how kids talk to each other, treat each other, the kind of behaviors, activities, actions, words. It creates a really challenging environment, but also can be an environment where people's identities are really forged and where they really learn more about themselves and the kind of people they want to be. But I think that passage of middle school is tough for a lot of folks.
It is. And I was saying to you right before we started that part of it is, our brains are still forming. And a lot of people recognize that they're still forming up into your early 20s, but also where you draw most of your logic and stuff comes from different parts. And when you're in middle school, you're still in that emotional state. Like you're going off of pure emotion. So take that and then take like the normal stumbles of just like life and trying to figure out who you are. And it can be a lot.
It can be a lot, and we see many of those kids here at the Music School of Delaware, right? So we work with kids and adults from ages 18 months to 80 plus, and so we certainly see many of those middle school age kids here at the music school. But yes, I know we wanted to spend some time talking a bit about kind of the middle school experience, and I now am 44. And so I've had maybe a couple of years since middle school to reflect on what I learned about myself, what I learned about others, and also I think now with 30 to 32 years since I was in middle school, have really learned a lot about what that time of my life really taught me, and hopefully maybe some lessons I can I can roll forward in my leadership as I help to lead an institution committee and that is committed to helping kids become their best selves today.
Yeah, I would assume that having that experience and sort of knowing what that's been like is helpful when you're dealing with kids. Because, sometimes talking to someone who is like the popular kid and never really had problems and trying to help them understand what it was like being on the opposite side of that can be difficult versus someone who sort of lived that experience. And then when we talk about middle school, it's also around the time that mental illness starts really presenting itself, is in those early teen years. So combat that with bullying, and not to get too down, but like when I was 13, I actually ended up trying to take my life because the bullying was so bad. And it's really hard because I had had some symptoms up to that of me having depression, but it's also you're a teenager, right? So like you're moody, of course, you're emotional, of course. And it's like, well, how do parents know when it's more than that, where they should be getting some help versus it's just teenager stuff?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for sharing your part of your story. I mean, we're just going in right here on the bat in the first 5 6 minutes, and I'm so appreciative that you have the courage to talk openly about what you went through at that time, and um, I think that gosh, where to even start with all of this because it's such an interesting topic. I mean, when I could certainly we could spend some time talking about our respective experiences in middle school if we want to go way back to the beginning. And I know it's so different for kids today because of different social pressures, right? And different tools. Thank goodness I did not have a cell phone when I was 12.
Right.
I,
Yes.
I would have imagined a universe in which I was potentially getting into a lot of trouble because of a cell phone at age 12. So certainly young people today, at all ages, but especially middle and high schoolers, have a different set of social pressures and different tools that they use that can either be helpful or unhelpful to them. But I think many of the personality traits certainly are the same. You shared very courageously about some of the challenges you went through in middle school, and I had those same challenges. I came out as a gay kid when I was 12 or 13 years old, and in suburban Kansas City, Missouri, that was a challenging experience.
Mm.
And I did find that there was, in many ways, more support and more love for myself than I knew initially was there. But I also really discovered that that was one of the first times in my life that I faced a kind of adversity that felt for a period that it was very hard to overcome. Sometimes when we have those big feelings as a young person,
Mm.
and sometimes those big feelings and the amount, especially the amount of negativity coming at you as a young person, even sometimes as an adult. But if you have a certain type of negativity coming at you, or some anger or hate, or whatever it might be, it can feel quite overwhelming to deal with. And that was one of the first times in my life that I was faced with a um, type of emotions that just felt so hard to overcome. But it was also the first time in my life that I realized that you know uh, bad weather always passes,
Mm.
and although it's uncomfortable and although it can make us question ourselves and question others sometimes, it can also help. It can help to really fortify some of the best strengths and attributes that you have.
It's true. It's true. And that overwhelming feeling that you mentioned is, I think, exactly how I would describe it, especially for me back then, because it's like this feeling. I just remember feeling like it would never get better. Like this was the worst. And like I couldn't deal with this like forever. And it is a blessing to be able to make it to the other side of that and realize that, oh, it does get better. Like it does, you come through that time. But when you're in it, especially at that age, it just feels like this is so awful and I just can't deal with this awfulness forever. When you were dealing with some of those moments, I'm glad to hear that you found, love on the other side of that as well. Because you want to talk about courageous coming out at that age. There's many adults who won't either, especially in like smaller towns, because it is so hard. But with some of that, the negativity that you dealt with in bullying, like what strategies did you use to try to cope with them?
What a good question. I mean, it is. Uh, it is interesting to look back again. It was such a different time, and I guess I sound like a middle aged person saying that now. Back in the '90s
Back
when
in my day.
back in my day, right? Back in the '90s when I was a kid. Uh, but back in the '90s when I was a kid, there the there were even the phrase mental health was not. It was just not in the air. It just wasn't a thing. And so what this was the time where, at least in my middle school in suburban Kansas City, where if you had an issue, if you felt some kind of way, you would go to the school counselor, and the school counselor was the only resource that, as a seventh or eighth grader at the time, that I understood even existed or could be possible. And it turns out the school counseling, like any other therapy, is um, can be a mixed bag, and can even be problematic sometimes. So what was interesting for me back then, I'm really taking it back to 1993, 94. In terms of the resources that I had available, the initial thing was, well, go talk to the school counselor if you're feeling some kind of way. And because this was, because coming out as a young person was still a very new thing, ostensibly, kind of in public education at the time, that school counselor was not super helpful to me. But the folks that were helpful to me were teachers. There was a civics teacher in the eighth grade that sat down with me, that cried with me, that talked with me, and that really helped me to understand that I had a life worth living, and that I had potential and value as a person. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so when I think about kids today, and I think about, again, some of the kind of kids we serve at the music school, or the kids that are in public education, I think always that the circumstances may be different and the tools may be different. There are different social pressures, different technologies, but I'm always interested in this question of what can we do to support kids in becoming their best selves. And so I think that's an evergreen question. I think it was relevant 100 years ago. It'll be relevant 100 years from now, and the circumstances will be different, and the social pressures will be different, and the tools and technologies will be different. But kids are always going to be, and adults, but kids at that age, that stage of development of 11, 12 to 17, 18, they're going to need the kind of love and support, guidance and care that they deserve. And I would even just make one other comment, something that I've learned about. I don't consider myself an expert in human development. I'm not an expert in childhood development. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a childhood specialist. I just was a kid once, and I am an uncle, and I have worked in and around public education for 15, 20 years. But one of the things I have learned from experts is not only the importance of supporting kids and becoming their best selves in adolescence and in middle school and beyond, but as early as possible. Because so much of what is forming a person happens very, very early. It happens even before the age of 3. So certainly parents have a role to play. Family has a role to play. Whatever resources that folks have access to, whether it's pre-kindergarten, whether it's other educational resources, but that so much of what forms us is formed so early. And what we're seeing what's happening with that 12-year-old, that was formed years and years ago. It's just manifesting now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I've really found interesting over the years during interviews and talking with different people is like how young people know themselves. Especially, we're not in June yet, but usually for June, I do like a lot of pride conversations. I love those conversations. And it's always amazing to me how many of them are like, oh, I knew when I was like 8. Like I knew at a very young age. And so it's really changed how I talk to kids as well. Like, just listening to them. I think a lot of times adults put stuff on kids for who we think they are, who we think they should be, but really they kind of know themselves even at that young age if you just listen to them speak.
That there's so much truth to that. There is so much truth to that. And our job is to let kids be kids, right? And to um, I am to your point about listening to them, about you know observing, supporting, asking questions, being curious, being supportive. This idea that we have to be in a hurry to help a kid figure out their life, that's not an idea that I subscribe to as someone that works in education. I think one of the best things that we can do for and with kids is support them in being curious, empathic,
Mm-hmm.
caring humans,
Yeah.
and to be humans that are interested in qualities of character, interested in integrity, interested in honesty, interested in loyalty, and maybe less interested in the question at age 12 of what is your career path,
Yep.
right? So
Yes.
I was invited a couple of years ago to speak at a career day. An educator friend of mine invited me, and I said, oh, are these 10th graders, 12th graders? She said, no, this is I think it was like a third grade class. And I, on the one hand, I thought, oh, that's interesting. It's getting third graders to talk and think about what might be possible in the future. And then the other part of me thought, honestly, why is that important to a third grader?
Right.
Right? Why are we thinking already in the third grade about what is your career path? How, it's like, I think we've lost this a little bit in public education. There's been such a focus on career readiness and career success and career outcomes. And I think that there needs to be much more focus on character success and character readiness and character outcomes.
I cannot agree more with you on that sentiment because I think we spend a lot of time on career stuff and there's a lot of adults that don't know. But the thing is, like, that's okay. But we feel like we have to know. I had a quarter life crisis in my early 20s. And I think a lot of people do because what happens is we've been told that we should have it all figured out. Then we get out of college and we're like, wait, I don't. And I'm doing something wrong when we're really doing everything right. You're in your early 20s. You're supposed to be figuring it out. And I feel like it's more important to be vocal about that. And like you said, some of the questions that we ask kids, like, not what do you want to do when you grow up, but like, what makes you happy? Like, what brings you joy? Like, things like that. And to help them sort of figure out that path without making them feel like they have to have those answers.
Yeah. What makes you happy? What makes you curious? What do you want to learn about? What excites you? What's something that you heard that really lit you up, and why did it light you up? Like all of those things. I spent so many hours as a kid in libraries, and we didn't have a lot of money growing up. I grew up in public housing, and so I'd spent many hours in the library just reading. And this is the early days of libraries where you could listen to CDs in the library and you
Yeah.
the headphones, right? And that was so novel at the time. But public libraries were one of the best parts of my educational upbringing because it really inspired my curiosity. And because I had teachers around me in the public education system that were interested in my curiosity and interested in talking with me about what I was listening to, what I was reading. And, gosh, you've got this stack of 6 books that you brought into class. What, tell me what you're reading there and what inspired you to pick that book up. And so I think the more that we can be authentically interested in supporting kids and adults, but especially kids and young people in, you know, in having the space to explore, to be curious, and then to really talk and think about qualities of character. And obviously, as someone running a community music school here in Delaware, I happen to think that music education is one of the best tools for character development, for developing a sense of integrity, developing skills of collaboration, skills of real, deep, authentic listening. And so I see every day in our classes and ensembles here and in our one-on-one instruction, I see so much evidence that the work that we're doing is not only supporting kids in becoming better musicians, but it's really about supporting kids in becoming more of who they are, and hopefully becoming better people and better citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charles said the curriculum should be a lot more well-rounded. I agree. And there was also some comments earlier. He said middle school was rough for me. The change from elementary school to middle school was a challenge all by itself. I had severe acne problems from seventh grade to eighth grade, which made me conscious about my appearance. And then also that mental health wasn't talked about at all back then, which is very true. And actually, his comments led me to another question I had for you, which is, do you think that, or how do you feel like overcoming bullying and things like that in your younger years has shaped your perspective on empathy and kindness towards others?
Yeah. Uh, uh, you're seeing me have a very authentic, very real emotional response to that because, there, uh, I certainly, even at 44, I remember things that kids said and did to me when I was 12 and 13, especially while I was coming out as gay at that age. I certainly still remember things that kids said and did to me. And, and I also remember the kids in my classes, the kids that were friends or social acquaintances that were the other part of that narrative, which was the part of the narrative where they stood up for me, where they interceded, where they asked other kids to back off, where they said, I don't think you're being treated right or fairly. And so when I look back at the totality of that picture, it's probably a pretty common type of story that anytime that an individual is being picked on or persecuted or whatever, there are going to be some folks that love to pile on to that and that love to continue to pick on that person and to throw stones. And there will be some individuals that take a different approach and call up whatever courage they have, whatever bravery they have to defend that person, to try to protect that person from harm, to let that person know they're loved and valued. So I saw all of that back when I was 12, 13. I see all of that today. I mean, adults are going to be who they are, and much of this is formed very, very early. So I do, to your question, I hope I hope that uh, uh, like any kid who went through a difficult time, I hoped that the best part of what I took from that is of um, the importance of paying attention to how you show up for others, how you demonstrate love and care and empathy, and uh, the words and actions that you choose to take or not take. And not only what are the words or actions you can take that could be harmful, but what are you called to do when you see harm being inflicted on others?
Hmm.
I think that's just as important.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like you said, from adults to kids to everyone. And I want to transition a little bit into talking about what you do at the music school. So, how do you obviously you must see some situations like that or hear about them on the end now that you're the adult in the situation, like how do you address those, because I feel like there is a level of kids being able to solve some things on their own. So I feel like for me the hardest part would be knowing like when to step in, because you don't want it to go too far, but you also don't want to hinder their ability to learn how to protect themselves or speak those things or have other students step up like you said and have those moments. So like where do you find that balance and how do you deal with that in a school environment?
That's a great question. So, as a community music school, which is what the Music School of Delaware is, as a community music school, we work with kids in addition to what they're learning either at their public school or their charter school or their private school or their home school in some cases. And so there are some kids that we see for an hour or 2 hours a week, and there are some kids that we see for many more hours than that a week. But we don't see them nearly as often as their home public or charter or private school. And I also should mention that although I come from a family of educators, which I do, my grandmother on my dad's side was a public school teacher for 50 years. My grandparent on my mom's side, and then my grandparents on my dad's side were dance teachers for 60, 70 years. So I come from a family of educators, but I am not, I have not the talent, uh, Nimade, to be an educator myself. I really don't have the talent to do that. And we have the benefit of working with over 100 remarkable teaching artists on our faculty here at the Music School of Delaware that are doing just that work. So through our private lessons, through our classes and ensembles, they're doing that intensive work, whether it's one-on-one with a student, whether it's in a group with a student, a small group of 4 or 5, or a large ensemble of 50 or 60. They're doing that kind of work with students. And I think like any other place that works with young people, we see a little of everything. And again, my hope is that part of what we're doing, whatever the modality is, whether it's one-on-one intensive coaching and instruction, or whether it's big ensembles, that students that study here are learning about listening, are learning about collaboration, learning about empathy, and kids are going to be kids. So we can't change the fact that 6-year-old or 12-year-old or 17-year-old is going to be exactly who they are. But I have seen in many rehearsals, I've seen in coachings, in classes, ways that teachers are redirecting, ways that teachers are supporting, ways that teachers are holding space for difficult conversations sometimes with students, ways that teachers are holding students accountable for their words and action. So those are some of the things that I see here.
That's good. I love that. And I love that it's combined with music. So I love music. I obsessively love music. Music is my everything. I only have one tattoo, and it's little music notes. That's how much I
That's
love
amazing.
music.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Just because for me, it's always been so all encompassing. Like when I need to get away, I listen to music. When I was younger and couldn't really like express myself, I was that kid who would like turn on the song and turn the music on like really loud so my mom could hear it and know I was angry, even though I couldn't yell at her, but like the song could. So it was that for me. And then also playing music, it gave me the opportunity to travel with different orchestras. So it's definitely opened up a lot of doors for me. But that therapeutic, like the mental aspect of it, how music can either co-sign your mood, because sometimes you want to listen to something that expresses how you feel, or it can sometimes change your mood because you want to listen to something that flips it around. And so I think that that's amazing, and I love that the school is helping kids get in touch with that.
Absolutely. And to Charles's comment just now, music is healing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part of what it is. I mean, I think back on 45 and a half years that I've been alive on this earth, and maybe you have the same experience. I can think very much about different soundtracks for parts of my life.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I remember. I mean, there was I was 14, 15, and 14, 15. The soundtrack that at that time was heavily Fiona Apple. It was heavily Smashing Pumpkins, the album Siamese Dream, on
Mhm.
endless repeat. And that was definitely like a vibe with album where I wanted to experience a certain mood. So I'd put it on to take me to that place.
Yeah.
Um, Sarah McLachlan was part of the vibe at that moment. And then when I went to the arts high school, starting in the 9th grade in Kansas City, that my whole sonic and cultural universe just opened up. And then suddenly Tupac entered the picture, and then suddenly Mary J entered the picture, and then suddenly all these other modalities and early 12th century chant entered the picture, like all these other things that became part of the soundtrack. But I think that one of the advantages of the technology revolution of the last 30 years is that music is ostensibly more accessible than ever,
Mhm.
right? We can access more types of music in more ways through more channels than perhaps ever before in human history. Um, the downside of that is that I think two things are occurring. One of which is that there can be a little bit of a devaluation of the role of the musician
Mhm.
or the creator in that space, because so many people are making money on music, and often that person is not the person who created the music.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing is that the upside is that music. I really do think that music is a fundamental human right, and that everyone deserves the chance to discover and cultivate their authentic creative voice. Then on the other hand, you have there can be a focus more on kind of the culture of music, and sort of the trappings of music as celebrity, or um, music as culture, as opposed to focusing on music as an art, or music as a profession, or music as a thing to practice, right? And I do think it's a complicated picture, but the good news for young people today is that there's more access to music than ever before, and many kids. We're one place that people can learn music. Many kids are doing what? They're going online to learn music, right? They're watching YouTubes, they're watching TikToks for their lessons, right? So we have an opportunity to challenge, but an opportunity to continuously make the case that learning music in an in-person environment is worth the investment. Because I think for a lot of kids, and sometimes the parents may or may not know this, but for a lot of kids, they think it's like, oh, it's just about pulling up the latest TikTok and singing along to, singing along to Jessie J, or singing along to JoJo Siwa, right? And it's like, oh, now I know it, I've
Right.
practiced. But
Right.
there's so much more behind that in terms of technique and musicianship, and all of the again, all of the qualities of character that come with it, that I think really can only be taught when you're learning music, whether with other people or by yourself. But when you're learning music in a kind of highly excellent environment.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things I want to touch on. So, yes, when you mentioned soundtracking, like that's huge for me. I can like there's certain songs that will play and that I'll instantly remember like a period of time in my life or a book that I was rereading. I have this terrible habit like I'll listen to stuff on repeat for like an hour. And I was actually just talking yesterday about how I create stories in my mind because I'm always like kind of writing things, and I will soundtrack them to things. And because I have like a wide variety of music that I like, I will frequently, my friends make fun of me all the time, but if you say a word that's associated with the song like that, I am singing, like if we're comfortable, because it just instantly, like the song pops into my head because of that word association. But I like that about music, and I like that it's so unifying. Like you can have people who seem completely different and, and play a song like you wouldn't know that you love Tupac, but, you could meet someone and have those lyrics, and now you found a middle ground, which I think is awesome. And then, you talked about the aspects of learning. And yes, TikToks and all of those things are great, but there is something to be said about with a teacher, especially when it comes to instruments and sort of that technique. And also, part of learning isn't just being taught, it's like that creativity it pulls out of you and that self expression it pulls out of you. And you don't really get that with a TikTok or something like that. Like they're telling you what to do, which is great. But like I remember times with my music teachers, like, well, how do you interpret this piece of music? Like, how do you want it to sound when you play it? And I think like those are the things that are really like crucial. And those are the things that help you build your creativity and build your self-expression, which is one of the great things about music is building those things. But you don't necessarily get that if you're just mimicking what someone else is doing.
That's right, and I agree with all of that, and also then confidence enters the room, and how not confidence as a not confidence as just a mirror of saying, well, you showed up and you did it, and therefore you should be confident, but confidence as a practice, right? Which is to say that um, you know what students often think they're doing is practicing music, but what they're really doing is practicing.
Mm,
So they're learning how to be better practicers, which,
yeah.
guess what, is applicable to everything in life, because life is practice. And the more that you can learn about how you learn and practice how you practice. This sounds a little weird, but stay with me. But yes,
No,
you think
no,
so?
I was gonna say like no, that's so true, and it's so perfect because like there's something I think about our psyche where we just want to be good at things, right? Like we want to go from 0 to 60, and a lot of people, if they have to go through that middle step, they won't do something because it's uncomfortable or because they don't like the process. But like you have to learn to love the process of learning and growing to be able to enjoy new things. Like as frustrating as it is not getting stuff right away, like I've learned to love knowing that like if I keep doing this, I'll hit that aha moment. And then if I keep doing it a little longer, I'll hit in that moment where it feels like it's mine, where I'm no longer trying to do this thing of this other, but it feels like I have ownership of it because I know it so well. And I think you truly get that from practicing music or dance or things like that. So that's such a great point, is like learning how to learn is really what you're learning with those practicing.
I think that's it. I think that's it. And I think that uh, I think, and I'm a believer in public education. I will always stand for public education. And I, like many other people, worry about public education and worry about the focus on teaching to the test and all of those things, because it feels sometimes like public education goes far afield from that, which is, let's be an environment where we're learning how to learn. And we're not just learning to be able to digest or just to regurgitate or remember facts and figures and formulas and whatnot, but we're learning how our minds work. We're learning how to be better learners, how to be better listeners together. So that's where I think a place like the Music School of Delaware really adds so much value to the life of a person, whether it's a 5-year-old or 10-year-old or 27-year-old or 60-year-old, where it creates a space where it really is about learning how to learn, and that's a lifelong endeavor. I have been off and on in guitar lessons since I started here at the music school. So I'm trained as a singer, but I've never played the guitar. I've always wanted to play the guitar,
Mhm.
and here again, I had to remind myself, okay, I need to remember, how do I learn and how do I practice? And part of it for me was having to be patient with myself, because I my skills and aptitudes as a guitar player are, shall we say, modest. They're very, I'm not a great guitar player today,
Yeah.
but I have to be okay with not being a great guitar player and come back again to, okay, what are the habits that I know will help me be a slightly better guitar player next week than I
Mhm.
was last week?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. Like you said, it's a lifelong thing. And I really do feel sad. I feel like I see a lot of people who don't pursue things because they're not comfortable with that uncomfortable space. And you really have to get used to that. Something that you mentioned, though, which I think is great, is that the Music School of Delaware isn't just, we think school, we think kids. But you guys have stuff for adults as well in the community who want to keep learning and growing. Can you just share a little bit about some of your adult stuff?
Sure. Well, apparently you're going to be joining our orchestra soon. Perhaps we'll see. Would love
Perhaps.
that. We Thank you for that question, Nimade. So we have a whole range of programs, again, starting at age 18 month to folks age 80 plus. So we have a number of adult programs. We have adult ensembles. So we do have a community orchestra. It's the Wilmington Community Orchestra. Joe Hodge is the wonderful conductor. And this is a free community orchestra program, where, whatever instrument you play, violin, viola, trumpet, tuba, what have you, you can come on and join the community orchestra, and they rehearse every Monday night. They put on 3 to 4 concerts per year. They do a little everything. They're doing the classics, they're doing Beethoven and Brahms, and they're also doing new music and music by historically overlooked or historically underrepresented composers. We have a number of women's choirs. We run the Delaware Women's Choir, based here in Wilmington, and the Cantabile Women's Choir, based in Milford. And those are run by Joanne Ward, who's a legendary choral teacher. And those women choirs do fabulous work. I just heard them at a private event last night in Milford. That was terrific. Do a very entertaining and engaging program. We offer classes in musicianship, in music history, in music theory, in the fundamentals of music. You can take classes. We have a guitar ensemble class where if you don't want to learn, you can certainly study one-on-one. So any instrument you ever want to learn as an adult, you can come and study it at the Music School of Delaware. Or if you want to learn it alongside colleagues, there are a number of instruments where we offer group classes where you can join with other friends or colleagues and learn that instrument alongside other folks. So there are a lot of different opportunities for adults at any age, stage of life. We offer tuition assistance and scholarship both for kids and adults. We want to be as accessible as possible. Our mission is musical excellence for all. And when we say all, we really want to mean all. So whether that is, folks that live right down the street from us here on North Washington and Wilmington, or folks that live in Seaford or Dover or Smyrna or Lewis, we really want to be what is considered a statewide resource for music education for folks their entire life.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned your scholarships, because that was going to be something I talked to you or I asked about as well, because we didn't have a lot growing up, so I was blessed that I had some scholarship for my viola to play, which then led me to do other things, which then led me to actually get scholarships for college from my playing and the things in the younger years. So I love that you guys offer that. And can you just talk a little bit more about those financial opportunities?
Sure, absolutely. So we are so grateful that we have a terrific community of support, and that community of support continues to grow. And we invite anyone that's inspired by music as a fundamental right and that wants to see music access grow in the state of Delaware to continue supporting us. Because when someone decides to support us with a financial gift, our job is to activate that support and to make sure that it makes a positive impact in our community. And one of the ways that we do that is through tuition assistance and scholarships. So we have a big program. I can't even remember the number. I think it's well over $500,000. It might even be 600,000 or 700,000, but it's at least $500,000 that we grant out through scholarship and tuition assistance every year. So we have different funds that are available. And when folks register for classes or lessons online, I hope we make it as easy as possible. I'm sure there are ways we can make it even more straightforward, but there's a lot of information on our website, which is musicschoolofdelaware.org. When you register, there's a lot of information there about the different scholarship and tuition assistance opportunities. And we have a terrific staff. Everyone is so friendly here. It's very much the Delaware way. People want to be helpful to each other. So if you or anyone has any questions about what's possible, how much do I need to pay, what sort of support is available, just give us a call at one of our offices, and I'm sure one of our terrific, friendly staff members will be happy to help.
Awesome. Yes, Charles says that's awesome, and I agree. Charles also said that he played the tuba in high school and college, so I might drag him to orchestra rehearsals too.
Yes, I want this. I am so ready for this duo to happen.
Some orchestra playing. I love it. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining me. I know sometimes it's hard talking about the younger years, but I really feel like they do shape who we are today in a lot of ways, especially those of us that have had the opportunity to learn and grow from them. Some people stay stagnant in those years, but for those of us that have learned and grown, I think it's great to talk about it and reflect on it. And then also just talking about music, like I said, it's huge to me, and I think it's impactful for everybody. So thank you for the work that you're doing through the school as well.
Oh, Nimade, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and the work that you do to bring people together in conversation, to connect people across our entire community, across the state and beyond. And we want to be part of this ecology, this ecosystem. We want to be part of these conversations because I really do think music is one of the best ways that we can connect, that we can learn about ourselves, learn about each other, have our eyes open to a world much bigger than we even think that we understand. And so I invite you and everyone to join us at the music school. We have concerts, classes, performances all year round. We're about to enter our centennial, so we're turning 100 years old very soon.
Wow.
Which is amazing. We look pretty good for 100. And so we're going to have a whole slate of new programs that we'll be announcing in the months ahead. Many of these programs, thank you so much, Charles. Many of these programs will be free and open to the public. Again, we want to be a statewide presence for good, a statewide presence advocating for the power of music to change lives for the better. So we invite all of you to be part of our community as we celebrate 100 years and look to the next 100 years.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining. And for those watching, please go to the website for the Delaware School of Music or Music School of, I always say it backwards. The Music School of Delaware. Check out the website and all the great work they're doing. Thank you so much again for joining me tonight, Stephen. Thank you for those who are joining at home. Please come back next week. I have Reverend Aisha with us, and we're going to be talking about working through grief and dealing with and having resilience and how all of that goes with our mind and everything. So please come back for that important conversation and have a great week.